The name Osiris is the Greek word for the hieroglyph Wesir or WSR, which is thought to mean he who is strong, but no definite conclusion has been reached. It is also thought to mean the place of the eye. Other varieties of the spelling and pronouncing of his name are Osir or Usir. Also sometimes Wenifer, Grems, Onifris, which means the eternally good being or the perfect one. Wesir/Osiris has been called Lord of the Duat, Afterworld, Judge of the Blessed Dead, Father of the Kings and many other epithets. There exists much discussion about the origin of his name, and its acute accent meaning, though the most likely explanation seems to be that his name is related to the word Wozer, which would mean mighty one. Origin. There have been various theories as to the origin of Wesir/Osiris. One places him as being a foreign human king during the pre-dynastic times, entering Egypt from the north and settling finally in Jeddu, Busiris, in Lower Egypt, where his cult center grew. It was probably here that his association with an earlier deity Anjati stemmed from. Another theory is that he developed from the primitive fertility god, Nepri, in Lower Egypt to become one of the greatest and most important of all the Egyptian deities, whose myth still lived on long after the fall of Egypt. As such, he was associated with the inundation of the Nile and symbolizing the fertile land of Kemet. From this, his association with resurrection, regrowth and new life in the underworld developed. In the late period, Plutarch described him as a human king who brought knowledge and agriculture to Egypt, though this legend must be taken with a grain of salt. His authority as a king and a divine judge of the underworld probably came from his role as a source of fertility and his ability to regenerate life. Just as he had triumphed over death in the vegetation world, so was he thought to triumph in a wider sense over the deceased in the kingdom of the dead. His experience of suffering and his ability to conquer death made him a ruler not over the living but over the dead, thus promising them eternal life. As a vegetation god, he was also regarded a corn deity, with association to an early corn god Nepri, and connects to other Near Eastern deities like Adonis, Dionysus, Tammuz, but a common origin has not been proven. Sometimes he is called the Lord of Jeddu, Grems, Busiris. It was also in Jeddu that Wesir acquired his symbol, the Jedkular, which came to symbolize strength and resurrection, and the royal insignia, the crook and the flail. Depictions. The earliest depiction so far of Wesir/Osiris shows his head and upper torso on a block from the 5th dynasty, King Isis. Above it is the symbolic name of Wesir/Osiris in hieroglyphs, an eye and a throne. He is often depicted in human form, in white mummy wrappings and with his skin white or black, alluding to the realm of the dead, or green as a symbol of resurrection. Out of the mummy wrappings his arms protrude and he is seen carrying the crook and the flail as a sign of kingship. He wears the Edif crown, the tall, conical crown of Upper Egypt, flanked by a plume at each side, and Ramacute accent S horns as its base. Titles and epithets. Wesir/Osiris is called by many epithets and titles. Through them it is possible to glean information of the nature of him and how come he was capable of embracing several deities. The most usual one is probably for most of the Westerners, as already mentioned, the ancient Egyptian meaning of the deity Khentiamentu. This shows Osiris as a funerary god at Abedjau. Another title pointing at Osiris' acute accent S linked to funerary beliefs and mummification is he who is in the god acute accent S tent. By tent is meant the booth or pavilion, where the mummification took place. It is also believed that Osiris assumed the role of Yanipu, as protector of this process. Then there are epithets which describes Osiris, as being resident at different locations. Of these the one called, he who dwells in Saharine, with a season in the sky and a season on earth stands out, as it places Osiris as belonging in the sky as an astral deity and contrasts with his usual realm in the underworld. He who dwells in Iudu, Grems, Heliopolis, places him at the location where the Enid originated, and he who dwells in Anjit refers to the Lower Egypt cult center at Jeddu, Grems, Busiris, where Anjiti was the original local deity. Sometimes the name Osiris Wenofer, is encountered. It is thought that this might be referred to another deity altogether. It translates beneficent being or he who is everlasting in a fine condition and might have been used as a euphemism to cover up the decay of death. The Greek version of it is Onifris, not to be confused with Onurus/Anhur. Osiris in myth. In myth he is the son of Geb, the earth god, brother and the husband of Aset, Grems, Isis, and brother to Netet, Grems, Nephthys, and Seth. He was slain by his brother at the shore of Mediat, resurrected by his sister spouse who also gave him his son Heru, Grems, Horus, whom he in the end took revenge upon his brother Seth. Go here for the myth. There exists no written account of his myth, so it is surmised it was handed down by oral tradition. The earliest and most complete written version is by Plutarch, and thus it reflects Greek style and perception of the world, and is of a much later period in history. However, this myth can be traced in the pyramid texts, Old Kingdom, and New Kingdom, or Greek or Roman inscriptions and reliefs on some temple walls refers to rites held at annual festivals held to Osiris. Through this myth Osiris became the ruler of the underworld, king of the deceased. He was seen as the night form of the sun, even the moon sometimes. Osiris in the Pyramid Age. During this time Wesir/Osiris exists, as that deity into which the deceased king transforms. Great importance is attached to this concept, and during the whole of the Old Kingdom, the king was the only person whose existence was seen as continuous, unbroken by death, and only transformed into Osiris. Inscriptions in the pyramids from the 5th dynasty onwards describes Osiris as the legendary first ruler of pre-dynastic Egypt. These inscriptions are the earliest hints of the myth of Osiris as a pre-dynastic ruler of Egypt, and this myth was to last through the almost 4,000-year-old history of ancient Egypt. Osiris and the sun god. Opposed to Osiris as ruler of the Duat, there is his connection with the concept of the sun king. It is believed that this reflects the ancient Egyptian fear of death. They dreaded the gloom of the underworld, and therefore it lay close to hand to in Osiris see the counterpart of the sun god, the opposite pole so to speak. This would ensure that the underworld would always have at least some shade of the light of day. It was said that Re and Osiris embraced one another, as twin souls, and Re is even told to supervise the funeral of Osiris. This might also be the reason Osiris was often seen as the moon, while Re symbolized the Sunday. Osiris at Abedjau. During the Old Kingdom Wesir/Osiris seems to have absorbed the ancient Canine deity at Abedjau, Abydos, Khentiamentu, and replaced him as the main deity there. The name Khentiamentu means foremost of the Westerners was also included in the long line of epithets for Osiris. Abedjau was situated on the west bank of the Nile, the area where the sun sets and prepares to descend into the Duat. It is also here where many cemeteries and necropolii were placed in the ancient days. Festival of Osiris. It was here at Abedjau that the yearly passion plays of Osiris were acted out. These drew pilgrims and visitors from all over the country, and rituals were held within the closed-off sacredness of the temples, while outside of them people acted out the drama of the myth of Osiris. It went on for days and were probably one of the most frequented and longest celebrated of ancient Egyptian festivals. We don't accently know very much about what exactly went on. It seems that both priests and lay people assumed roles as deities and other characters from the myths and acted out these mythical events. A stela in the Berlin Museum tells about a high official called Ichernefert, living in the Middle Kingdom, who was ordered by the king to use Nubian gold for decorating the cult statue of Osiris, and to construct a new shrine out of cedar wood for the god. The shrine was inlaid with gold, lapis lazuli, silver, and bronze. Then the stela tells that a bark, called Neshmat, was made, to carry the shrine enclosing the cult statue on, and it also tells of what processions were made. The procession of Wepwat. Wepwat was an ancient canine deity, said to open up the way. Here he acted as a herald of Osiris. The Great Procession. The shrine of Osiris is carried in a funeral procession from his temple to a symbolic tomb. On the way there is a struggle enacted against his enemies. Return to the temple. The shrine and the ceremonial barks are brought back on the Nile to the temple for concluding purification rites. Osiris in the Middle and New Kingdom. Towards the end of the Old Kingdom and during the First Intermediate, the concept of the king being the sole one to be transformed into Osiris and eternal life began to spread to other high nobles and courtiers. This is often called the democratization of the funerary beliefs. Quote, already in tombs of nobles during the 5th dynasty there are signs of Osiris being the protective deity, and in the 11th-15th dynasties, accompanying funerary texts had become a must for officials and those who could afford to have these made. Osiris became more and more the king of those who are not, meaning that his kingdom was the Duat, where the dead lived their eternal lives. In the New Kingdom there is also once again signs of the polarity between life and death, as Osiris is called Lord of the Living, Lord of the Universe, or Ruler of Eternity. The many epithets of Osiris can be seen in the Book of Going Forth by Day, spell 142. Here is just a small selection. Osiris of the region of life. Osiris, the Lord,